Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's presentation. With me today, we have our esteemed guest, Mr. Jordan Borean. We also have Wayne here on the just to kind of hang out and say g'day, and obviously myself as your MC for tonight. Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly make sure that we are live and people can hear us. Yep, that sounds like we can. Cool. Alrighty. So, yeah, it's going to be a little bit more informal than what we're usually approaching. So I'm just going to kind of waffle on for a little bit to talk about. We're going to plug my book. I'll plug my book. Plug our book. Sorry. Jeez.
You put
So
a lot of work into it.
I did put a lot of work into it, but it's still, there's other people contributed to it, so it's not mine. Like, um, so yeah, so anyway, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I hope you guys stick around for the hour. We're going to obviously it's a little bit more informal, but still going with that informal approach. This month, Jordan will be giving a quick talk about PowerShell modules. This next month, we're going to actually have Scriptrunner on, so Scriptrunner will be conducting a talk as well. And then I believe for November, we might be having Matt Core on, and he'll be giving a talk. Still not sure what. It might just be a bit of a show and tell. So definitely, it's always exciting to see what everyone is doing. Yeah, and finally, yeah. So I'll quickly talk. I'll just quickly make a quick mention that we're sponsored by Scriptrunner. I really should have like a little like video thing. I should actually put this together, like Linus does with the WAN show. It's like we're sponsored by these people. So yeah. So huge thank you to Scriptrunner for hosting our meetup and obviously paying meetup costs along with that. If you're interested with Scriptrunner, consider if you're interested in running PowerShell and making PowerShell easy, consider Scriptrunner because it's a really, really great tool for that. Also, yeah, so obviously the other thing which also is kind of in the news was, apart from the Optus breach, was last week we had the privilege of being able, was it last week or this week? It was last week. We had the privilege of being able to finally release the modern IT automation with PowerShell book on LeanPub. So that's been a really, really long journey. And essentially, if you guys, I'll just quickly share my screen and just throw it up. So if how can I do that? Secondary screen, set the screen to share. I'm just going to quickly throw it up. And not an automation. I'm just waiting for the screen to load. Wait for the browser to load. All right, cool. So, can you guys see that screen? There we go. Can you guys see my screen? I think that's working.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, modern IT automation with PowerShell. Minimum price at the moment is $30 US. It's going to be on sale for the next, I think 15 days. It's 15 to 20 days, and then it'll go up to $40 US. So if you kind of wanted a bit of a discount, go and grab it. So there's a couple of, we will probably in the future, we'll do a little bit of a review and retrospective with regards to the book publicly. So obviously we'll do a private one and then we'll kind of do a bit of a public one to kind of talk about a little bit about what the lessons we learned inside the book and things like that. So it's definitely worth, yes, it's definitely worth sticking around. The other thing with regards to that is the book is, it really just kind of serves as an intermediary resource that really kind of just helps bootstrap you to be able to get you into a more of an expert state. So, it's just covering things that basically, a lot of the people within the industry are using just in terms of, regex. The one thing that everyone uses the tester but doesn't fully understand. Things like, PowerShell security, other things like just refactoring PowerShell, making it a little bit easier, testing, and just Git, things like that. So it's a really, really great book. Obviously, all the proceeds for the book, it all goes to charity, like the previous PowerShell conference books. So yeah, if you're interested, yeah, pick up a copy today. As just a bit of an FYI, the book, the paperback, hardback copies will be hopefully in the coming weeks. I'm still just trying to organize a sample book so I can kind of get a bit of a feel for making sure there's no additional issues or any sort of formatting issues in the final manuscript before we release it to the public. There have been a number of little changes that we have pushed. So one of the things that we did recently push was a change from docs.microsoft.com to learn.microsoft.com. So all our links within the book have now been updated. But if you're interested in the book, go and grab it. Just also a bit of a plug is that within the book, there are coupon codes for discounts for the other PowerShell conference books, and there's also an Easter egg within that book. So if you think you can find it, you haven't, keep digging. I'm being intentionally vague as well because that's a clue. So anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our esteemed guest, Mr. Jordan. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. How can I do that? Okay. Alrighty, over to you, Jordan.
Cool. So my name's Jordan. If you haven't seen me before online, I work with Ansible, mostly on some Windows development as well as on the actual engine itself. But today I'm here to talk about PowerShell modules, which isn't really an Ansible topic. More specifically, I'm here to talk about binary PowerShell modules because there's a lot of guides online talking about how to set up and structure script-based modules, but binary ones seem to be either relegated to maybe some official docs, and there's a lot of terms that can be a bit confronting if you haven't sort of used them before. So I'm here to show you how to sort of structure it and how I start developing a new module, and I'm hoping to go from start to finish all the way to actually publishing a module to the PowerShell gallery. Um, there's a few reasons why I prefer binary modules over script modules. If you're having to deal with loading .NET assemblies from NuGet, it's a lot easier to reference them and have them part of your build cycle. So if you're wanting to reference things to use with like DNS, there's like a whole bunch of libraries that are out there which you can use where if you're using a script-based module, it's a lot harder to integrate with that script. I also find binary modules, the error handling functionality inside it is a lot more saner than PowerShell error handling that you get with script-based modules. So it sort of forces you to be a bit more clearer. Other things around sort of performance, it can technically be more performant than script-based modules, but that's sort of like something that you don't really have to care about for general ones. But it's just nice to have that option in there. I also just like writing in C# more than PowerShell these days, so it's nice to be able to do that, but still contribute with the actual PowerShell ecosystem. So let's just sort of get straight into it. Let me share my first window, which will be my console. Cool. Okay, so we can see that here. So if I was a smart person, I would actually have a template which I would use. So I'd be able to do like
One
.NET
sec, sorry.
New.
I just got to make sure that I can. I can't see your screen. One sec, sorry. I'm just going to highlight that.
Cool.
There we go.
Because I'll have to be swapping with two other ones as it goes on, but I'll let you know when
That's
that
fine.
happens.
I've got Director here. I can just flick you around.
Cool. Like if I was a smart person, I would have things like .NET New or using something like Plaster, or there are various other template stuff there to sort of auto-generate them. But I've been a bit slack, and what I usually do is I just take my latest PowerShell module that I've been working on, clone it, and just do some renames. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to clone one of my repositories, which I know that I've recently touched, and I'm just going to call it test bin. It's just going to clone it for me. Once that's cloned, I want to go into code, which will open up a new window. And what I want to do is I want to remove the original Git folder, so it doesn't actually have the original reference on there. So when that one's done, I'm essentially done with the actual command line. The code test bin will open up Visual Studio Code for me. So let's swap this window over there. So let's make the font a bit bigger so it makes it a bit easier to see. Let me know when you're all good, Michael.
Good to
All
go.
good? Cool. So essentially, I've got a pre-existing layout from a module that I know that works. There's a few things in here that I need to either rename or delete. So in this case here, there's some folders that I don't care about because it's specific to this one here. I'll do a Control-Shift-F. I will search for the original module name, and I'll just do a blind replace for all those ones there. So that's going to change any reference that I may have online for that one there. Some other things that I want to do, I want to clear out the essentially all the items in the documentation folder. So I'll just delete that folder. I need to rename some files. So this is where a template would be great because it would actually do this for you. But in this case here, as again, I'm quite slack. So once I've deleted these files, I'll go through the basic structure that's on there. Cool. So essentially the way that I lay out my binary modules. So I have my GitHub stuff, which is for my CI. So it has all the stuff in there it allows it to run checks, builds the module, runs tests, and all that type of stuff when I actually check it in. We'll cover that when we actually get to that particular part, but that's important for the later stages and trying to maintain your actual module going forward. The next one is a VS Code folder. There's a few files in here that makes your experience in Visual Studio Code a lot easier. So the first thing is that it has a few recommended extensions that you should install. So this one here will just pop up in there if you haven't installed them to install them on your profile. There's a whole bunch of things that you can actually do there, but it's fairly bare bones. The launch file is a bit more important. So it contains some sort of configurations that allow you to debug it. So like the basic one here does a PowerShell launch, but at the same time, it's going to import that module. So if I press F5, it's going to pop up a new PowerShell window with this module already imported. So I can actually debug things in there and try some other stuff out. There's some other ones in there. So attaching to an actual process, which can be useful if you already have a PowerShell process already loaded and you want to actually attach it to debug things there. But I probably don't use that one as much. The launch is probably the better one, and I'll show you that at a later point. The next ones is settings. So these are a few things that I have on there. So like I trim white space, I insert the final new lines on save. Because this is a binary module, I want to make sure is that when it's creating the temporary integrated one, it's creating in a new process. So that's what this particular setting here does for you. Basically, the reason why that's important is that when you load an assembly in PowerShell, you can't actually unload it in Windows, and that keeps files locked. So by doing it in a new process, you can easily just kill that process and then redo things as you go along there. The Pesta stuff is, I don't use the old legacy style because I've got Pesta version 5, so that's just a particular setting there. The last one is a bunch of predefined tasks on there. So this makes it easier for you to build and do other types of stuff. So the main one is the build task. It's actually being set as the actual default build. So there's some default bindings in Visual Studio Code. So Control-Shift-B can build your module on the fly as you've made changes. In this particular case here, it's just running a file to build it. So you can even run this one manually if you want. It's just sort of a convenience part there. Another one is updating the docs. So in this case here is a pretty long command, but essentially what it does is it loads Platypus, a Platy PS, and updates the documentation from the actual things on there. So you can easily do that as you make changes. There's also one here to actually run the tests for you in the new process. They're just sort of simple things that you have on there. So as we go on, the doc stuff is empty. I'll have to remember what the command is to actually generate the initial skeleton, but we'll get to that particular point. The next side here is the module stuff. So this is what I usually would put in a script-based module. So you have like your manifest file, the PSM1, as well as any public or private stuff that you have on there. Some of the stuff in here is quite important. So in this case here, because we've copied a new one, we need to create and change the GUID in there. So I've just generated a new one, so I need to replace that. So in this case here, the root module is the PSM1. If you don't want to have a hybrid one, you can actually set that to the path of your binary DLL. But using a PSM1 allows you to have that sort of hybrid aspect. So you don't have to go all in on a binary module. You can have both binary as well as the sort of script-based stuff that you have in there. The module version, I just want to set to 1. As I said, I've just generated a new GUID to uniquely identify this one here. So description, there's a whole bunch of different things in here. So there's like test description just for this one here. PowerShell version, I'm setting a cap as 5.1 as the minimum. You can set it as 6, 7. This is all really just metadata. I don't even know if PowerShell Get uses it for anything. So use it as grain of salt, but it's always best to sort of document the minimums that you have on there. This case here, I usually keep all these ones here empty. Types and formats to process can be fun if you're including them in your module. Just really depends on how you actually have it set up. Functions to export is usually what you use for script-based modules. So this is the stuff here that you use to export specific functions. But because we're calling a binary module, we're actually wanting commandlets to export. So I just need to clear out the existing ones that I have from my old module. We'll be filling this one out here as we build our first command. All this other stuff is really just not really needed. So we just want to clear out some of the existing things in there. And that's it from that one there. The PSM1, we'll have to edit this a bit later, but essentially what this does is this actually will import our binary module as we go in there. So the reason why I have this one here is that I have 2 different binaries that might be imported based on the system that it's running on. So if we're running Windows PowerShell, so 5.1, I want to use my .NET Framework binary. If we're using PowerShell 7, I want to use my .NET Core. So it just really depends on what you can do. You can use this as a script-based module, do all sorts of other things that you can do today. But in this case here, we're sort of just going full in binary, so we don't really have to touch that until we start writing some commands. The next folder that's important is the source folder. So this is where you actually be writing all your C# code and everything else like that. So if we open up our CS project, this has sort of various metadata that we have on there. So target frameworks is the frameworks that you actually want to target. So in this case here, I'm producing 2 binaries, but if you have a very simple one, you can actually use Net Standard 2.0. And this one here is a sort of a special identifier that allows you to create a binary that can be imported both in .NET Framework, so Windows PowerShell, as well as sort of just .NET as it's called today, so PowerShell 7 Plus. There may be some cases where you need to use a specific framework. So what I had before is Net 4.7.2, so .NET Framework, as well as Net Core or Net, what it is called today. But in the majority of the cases, you can keep it simple and have a simple binary. So Net Standard. Assembly name is testbin. You can call that whatever you want. I want to make sure that it reflects what the actual module's called. So that's what it's called there. Nullable is a nice feature that I find with C#. To opt into nullable types is sort of a nice way of having sort of some code smell in there and making sure that your things actually work properly. You don't have to have it if you don't want to, but I like to have it. In this case here, we don't need to have unsafe blocks. It's just a feature that I had for the original one. And I set the language version as 8.0. I believe 10 or 11 is the latest and it has some nice features in there. But unfortunately, you can't bump that if you need to target Net Standard or .NET Framework. So 8 is the highest that you can have in there. We don't need any of this stuff here at the bottom. We're producing one binary one. The only extra thing is that we need to make sure that we target the PowerShell standard library. So in this case here, we're adding a reference. So PowerShell standard library. Currently in NuGet, the basic one or the main one that people use is 5.1.0. Don't be confused. This isn't actually reflective of PowerShell 5.1. this is just sort of the main versioning that they sort of set on. And what it is that it's like an API service for PowerShell that allows you to load all the types that you'll be needed for your commandlets. The other key feature here is this private assets section. Private assets all means that it wants to download this one here to actually compile it, but when you're using it, it's not going to ship this DLL with it. So it's going to load what actually comes with PowerShell itself. You can actually target system management automation. So system.management automation, which is a bit more reflective of PowerShell, and that's where the version is reflective of what you want. So 5.1 will be Windows PowerShell 7 is PowerShell 7, and so on. But in this case here, because we're just using Net Standard 2.0, we only really need to target PowerShell standard library. So that's sort of the basic project that we have on here. And if you want to add in more references to like that DNS stuff that I was talking about, or any other sort of C# library, this is where you would add it in. So once that's done, there's a whole bunch of files that we have on here. So the build stuff is sort of just a generic script that I've got to build things and do the tests. I don't have to change anything in here because I've made it generic. Changelog, just remove what we have in there. License, I use the MIT license. I think that's the general standard that we have in there. Not many people really change, but you can put whatever you want in there based on your requirements and recommendations. README, I keep fairly simple. There's a whole bunch of badges in there that you may need to change, but this is a test one, so we don't really have to go into this too much. But in this case here, I just want to sort of just fix up a few things, but it has a link to the actual main docs as well as how to install it and a whole bunch of other stuff. But you can fill in whatever you want. It's a README for your module. It's really whatever you desire. Requirements dev is a bunch of PowerShell modules that it's required to actually build this module. In this case here, invoke build is what I use to actually do the build steps and tests. Pester, self-explanatory, it's actual tests for the module. PlatEPS is for documentation. PS Script Analyzer is for analyzing PowerShell files. That's probably not as useful in this one here because this is a binary module, but if you've got that sort of hybrid setup, you can actually use that to validate your things. I've got no settings for it, so I just leave this one blank. And then this one here has all the logic to actually build the things. And once again, this is all generic, so I don't have to actually touch that. It's got everything that I need built in for it, which is nice. So in this case here, we want to start off creating a very basic commandlet. So in this case here, we want to create a commandlet that will output a string to the thing. So we want to do hello world command.cs. You can call this file whatever you want. I like to make sure that it sort of reflects the actual files that are in there. So in .NET case, we want to import system and system.management.automation. System.management.automation is the PowerShell library where you can import all the things that are required to actually to load all the PowerShell components. It's giving me red squigglies because I haven't actually loaded all the modules and stuff. So I'm just going to do Control-Shift-V to build this module here. It's probably going to fail, but we'll see what happens. So in this case here, it's just going through some downloading the prerequisite modules, local file based on our requirements. And it's going to do all sorts of different things, and it's going to fail because something's wrong. And I don't know, I need to figure that one out there.
Jordan, do you have a quick sec? I'm just going to see if I can fix. I'm going to see if I can add your video into the scene. 1 sec, mate.
Cool.
No, not me. Okay, so I'm definitely new to this. Sorry, just bear with me for a sec.
Okay.
That's really interesting because in the browser, it looks like essentially is well, we've got our, all the guys on our normal stream, and it's just me in the browser, which is a little weird. So I'm just going to try and do this. See if that fixes it.
Do you want me to just turn my camera off?
I don't think it might be mine actually. Let me try something. I'll just have to deal with it. 2 secs. What I will do is I will go away and do some further study on this, and we'll figure that out. So I've just popped your screen back on now. Um, your screen share back on now, Jordan, so you can just carry on.
Yep. So yeah, it's just a simple fix that I need to do in there because I changed from 2 frameworks down to one. I need to fix that up so the code is a bit more generic, but that's been fixed. So I've done a build. What it's done is it's downloaded some bin and object folders, which actually contains PowerShell standard library. So if I go back into my hello world command, I would hope that would actually fix it, but obviously not. Sometimes VS Code can be a bit annoying. In this case here, we'll just push on. If that was already in there, it shouldn't be squiggling, but it's fine. So in this case here, we want to just complete out the rest of our command. So we have the namespace. I usually make the namespace the same as our module name. And then the class, we want to do a public class hello world command. And we want to make sure we inherit from the PS commandlet thing there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close this window and reshare it because that's going to be annoying. I've got to figure out how to actually refresh all this in Visual Studio Code that doesn't require me closing and then opening it. But as you can see here, the squiggly has gone. It's actually detected it, so all's well. So in this case here, we want to add this one here. We want to say this is a commandlet where it's got a common verb get, and we want to just call it hello world. So what this means is that the actual command will be called get hello world. There's a whole bunch of things you can use your own verbs that don't actually match the name on there. So it's really up to you. So in this case here, we're calling that. We want to add a parameter. This should look quite similar to when you're writing PowerShell modules, just with a little C# spin to it. We want to call this a string. So it's a string parameter. And we want to add a default value on there. So we've created a parameter called object on this one here. In this case here, it's meant. Well, actually, no, we don't want to make it mandatory. It's got a default value. So in this case here, it's got a default value of world, but you can change it to however you want. We want to override the process record. So this is the same as a process block. You can use an end block or a begin block. You can put it all together. It's really up to you how you want to do it. So in this case here, we want to do a simple write object, and we want to output our parameter from here. So we're just doing hello, then whatever that actual value is called. So we've created a very basic commandlet, which just outputs a string based on the actual parameter. One thing we need to do is we need to tell our manifest that we actually now have this function in there. So in this case here, commandlets to export, we got get hello world. And we want to do, so we only have the one in here. We can just do net standard 2.0, and we can remove this extra fluff that I've got in here because that's no longer on there. The other thing that we need to do is we need to just change the type that we've used to be specific to this module. So just remove whatever's there from beforehand, just to make that a bit generic. So we've built everything in here. Everything's on there. We can do Control-Shift-B to rebuild our module. So this will compile our code into a DLL. It will copy all the files in place into a specific directory. So the build has succeeded. If we go into our output directory, we can see that test bin has our PSD1, our PSM1, with all the changes that we had in there. And in the bin directory, it actually has our DLL, which has all our compiled code for it. So instead of, we'll do an integrated terminal so we don't actually have to deal with changing it in here. So in this case here, everything's compiled. I can do F5 to actually start a I need to change what F5 does. So it's set to do another build on F5. And then it started in here. So in this case here, it's loaded our task. So if we do get module test bin, we can see that the module is loaded, and we can actually do get hello world to run our things here. We can do our parameter. What did I call it? I called it object. And we can see that it's on there. One other thing that we can do is we can actually debug things. So I can set a breakpoint in the actual code for there, do get object hello world, and we've got a breakpoint here. We can see what all the various things in here. So we can see our parameters that are actually set to. We can even change that on the fly if we want to. There's a whole bunch of different things in there. So you can step through the code. You can do whatever you want. It's quite useful if you're sort of testing various problems that are actually in there. So we can continue. This shows that our module works. It's actually built, and everything sort of works in there quite nicely. So we don't need to do any more testing. It's whatever you want to do in the future. But we can see how simple it was to actually create a very basic module, how to define parameters. And it is quite similar to how you do it with an actual script-based function. It's just got a bit of a C# spin to it. So it's quite simple in my mind. The hardest bit is sort of figuring out the first steps, and that's what sort of I'm hoping to try and alleviate people that are a bit scared of it and how it can be done. And even if you do get lost, the PowerShell Discord and the various communities out there, they're very helpful for this type of stuff. So if you have any questions, there's many people out there that are more than happy to help you with it. The one thing that I actually do want to do is I need to remember how to generate the initial platypus stubs. Let me just double check.
I'm just going to quickly jump in, and
Yeah.
I've got two questions. The first question comes from Matt. Matt's basically asking, is it just the commandlet property that maps from the C# method to the PowerShell command name?
Does he, if he means this particular one here?
I'm guessing
Yeah,
that's
I'm sure so. Yeah.
yeah,
So this commandlet attribute that you define on the class is definitely what defines the actual commandlet
yeah,
name. So
yeah,
we're using verbs common get, and then the noun is hello world. You can actually do a string here. So I could
yeah.
call this random, and I would call it random hello world. The only thing that you need to make sure on is that whatever you defined here is also part of your commandlets to export in your manifest. So they need to line up because that's what you're actually exporting.
The one thing I noticed is that when you ran get module test bin, you noticed on the module type, it's still script, it's not binary. I'm
Yep.
guessing the reason why is because you have that PSM1 file. And it's
Yes.
essentially thinking that because even though you're loading a binary as per se, it's still, you're still parsing a script. Is that
Yeah.
the case?
That's definitely the case. So we can
Yep.
see here that like the module root module at the top here is actually still calling our PSM1. So
Yep.
technically we are importing a script-based module, but
Mm.
all the meat and the chunks are actually in that binary assembly. What we
Yeah.
can
Okay.
do, we can actually load that one directly. So we can want to say the root module is bin. Um, it'll be under the framework name. I need to kill this process. Let's just do all that. So in this case here, it's going to be relative to the manifest file. So when we build this one here, it's going to copy all these files. It doesn't have to do any more building because we didn't actually change the code. And then once that's done, we can do F5. I'm going to change that so it doesn't actually build again when we do F5. That's all part of that. So we do get module. We can see that the module type is now binary because the root module has been set to a DLL. And if you've just got a single binary, that's the simplest thing. You don't even have to ship that PSM1. I just like to do it because it gives you flexibility in the future and you don't have to change things as you go along. So it's entirely up to you how you want to do things. Cool. What was there a
Cool.
second question, or was that from yourself?
That was just for myself.
Cool. So let's just put that back there. So what I was wanting to do was the platypus stuff, so documentation. So now that we've actually built the module, one thing that I find key and that I really hope people focus on is documentation. So documentation is quite critical and helps people sort of understand how you do things and how things actually work. If you have bad docs, it sort of puts people off and it makes it harder for people to actually use. So in this case here, we need to import platypus. Platyps. I keep on saying platypus. I think the thing is new markdown help. We want to do module test bin. Output folder is docs and US. Was there any other ones that I needed? We'll just start with that one. So in that case here, no, that wasn't new markdown help. About help, I think. No. Sorry, I just can't remember. This is the stuff that I really wish I would set up a template for. Module page. Sweet, that's what I wanted. So in this case here, I want to run a task. I want to say update docs. So that will essentially do what I sort of did before, but this is what you do whenever you wanting to actually make a change. What this does is it will actually scan the module. It'll find out. Got to fix that one. But we've already got the one here. So platyps will generate the markdown skeleton for you. It sort of gives you a template to sort of pre-fill things. So we want to have our get hello world module is fun for a synopsis. It gives you the existing syntax based on the actual parameters that are on there. So it does that automatically from you. For the description, we're just going to do this is a test description example. I'm just going to fill it out with some random stuff. So prints hello world with default parameters. Object parameter is the value to print with hello. Fills in all the pre stuff in there. Outputs. So that's quite simple. Let's see if this actually works again. If not, I'm going to have to fix that at some point. That's why. Sorry, I had the wrong path. This is the stuff that, yeah, once again, templates would definitely help with. So in this case here, it's just sort of done that again. Nothing would have been updated because whatever's in there. Test binary. I don't have any online docs, so I can just sort of delete that. In this case here, so we've just sort of built a very stub one. Our build process will actually use platyps to actually get these markdown files and generate the XML manifests that are actually used for PowerShell help. So what this allows you to do is do get help, get hello world. So in this case here, you can see that it's put in all the documentation that we had in there automatically. We didn't actually have to generate that XML. That's the beauty of this. And like it sort of just is magical. So all your documentation is in your markdown files, which I think is quite easy to maintain. Say, for example, we're wanting to add a new parameter for it. So we go back to our command. I'm just going to call it prefix. I'm just going to call it hello, and we're going to add that to our output. What we want to do is we want to update our docs because we've added a new parameter in there and we want to actually document that. So in this case here, it's going to build the module again, so it includes all the changes that have actually made, and it's going to use platyps to sort of regenerate that markdown file based on the new stuff in there. So if we go into our markdown documentation, we can see that it's still there from all the existing ones. It's added the new parameter for us automatically. It's kept our examples, but it's added the new parameter in here with the sort of the skeleton in there. So we just want to add some documentation, the prefix for the output. So you probably want to make this a bit more descriptive, but this is sort of a very test module that we have on there. So that's essentially it from the actual module development side. So we've seen how we can actually generate all the build stuff. There's a lot of hidden stuff that happens in the background there, but that's what sort of the build scripts that I've generated, which should be generic, are for. And we've seen how we can actually write a very simple commandlet in C# and get that all running in there. So the next step is to actually push all this stuff into our remote Git repository and how we can actually, before we do that, the most important thing is tests. So we want to create a test folder, make sure it's actually in the root, and we want to do a simple test. So hello world command.test.ps1. I need to remember the syntax for it. So in this case here, this is just a very sort of simple pester test. We want to make sure that we import our module. Some basic stuff in here. And then we want to just do our sort of basic tester thing. So describe. You can call this whatever you want. It outputs default values. Get hello world. Actual. So this is a very basic test in here. So we've sort of generated that. We can run our special task to be able to sort of figure out to make sure the actual tests are passing. And you can expand the test however you want. This is sort of just a very basic show you how it actually works. So the test task will build the module once again, make sure it has all our changes incorporated in there. And what it does is it runs the test harness to actually run the test on it. So it prints out some sort of very basic information, but then it runs our tests, which we can see had passed. So all is well. So now that we've built our tests, the next step is to go into GitHub and creating our repo. So this is what I'm going to swap to Firefox.
During this time, if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, or feel free to,
Cool.
Unmute yourself as well. All right, I'm just going to highlight that. Yep, you're good to go.
Sweet. Okay, so this is fairly simple. We just want to create a new repository, no template. In this case here, it's under my name. So we just want to actually create that repository. What we want to do is that we just want to basically sort of copy some of these commands in here. So in that one there, we want to init the repository. We want to commit. Basically, I just want to copy everything that's in here. So that's running in the background. I'm going to push that. So when I refresh this page, lo and behold, we have all our code that we've actually generated in here. It's running our workflow, which I'm hoping works out of the box, but if not, we can definitely fix that.
Just adds more character to the talk.
Yeah. So I probably chose the wrong module to actually template because this is only testing on Windows, but you can definitely test this on Linux and all the other stuff on there. So in my actual test before, so this is all defined in that YAML file in the actual repository. It has 3 stages. It has the build stage, which does what I was doing in VS Code, where it actually generates the module, all those files, and it'll actually publish a sort of a test artifact, which you can test manually locally if you do want. Once that's being built, it runs through the test stage where it actually takes that artifact that was built and runs the various tests on there. So it'll run our PESA tests to make sure that things are actually passing. And the benefit of this stuff here is that you can set this up on PR. So if people are, or even yourself, are trying to create a change, this stuff here automatically makes sure that the tests are passing before you actually merge it in there to catch any regressions or any failures that wouldn't be picked up in a normal review. Once the test pass, it goes into the publish stage. Publish isn't actually going to do anything right now because it's not running on a tagged build. But when you actually tag this repository remotely, it's going to actually publish that for you to the PowerShell gallery. So it's got all the smarts in there to be actually do that. So we can see that the build step has actually finished. We can go into it and see that it's got a whole bunch of output, but nothing's really sort of too exciting there. And then the next stage, once it eventually starts, is to actually run the tests on it. So if we go in here, it's going to run a test on PowerShell. So this is PowerShell 7 on Windows. And it's got to do a whole bunch of stuff like pulling it in and other stuff like that. So while this is running, because we know, well, hopefully, fingers crossed, the actual test will pass, the next thing that you want to do is generate an API token on PowerShell Gallery that will allow your GitHub action to be able to actually publish it. So in this case here, I'm already logged into my account. I want to go into API keys. I want to create a new one. So in this case here, I give it a nice label for it so I actually know what it's for. So in this case here, it's for GitHub Actions test bin. You can scope it for a specific time. I usually just keep it for a year. You just need to make sure you actually renew this after a year, but that's nothing too important. Just make sure if you lose it, it doesn't actually last forever. Pushing it, I want to actually push new packages and versions because this is a brand new one here. I actually need to push a new package. So I need to have this one ticked. And I only want to apply this to this particular module. So if this token leaks or is exposed in any particular way, it's not going to affect any of my other modules that I have available. It's only going to be scoped specifically to this one here. So I want to call it test bin. So in this case here, it's created a new one here. I can copy that one there. Once I refresh this page, it's not going to be accessible anymore. You actually have to generate a new one or delete your old ones for it. So you've got to make sure that you actually click copy and make sure that your clipboard actually has that copied in there. So we've gone here. We can see that the test is still running, but it's actually passed. It's going into just publishing the coverage. If we scroll up here, back into the summary, you can see that there's only one left there. So now that we have an actual API token for it, we can go into our settings, excuse me, add in a secret for our actions, and we want to create a new repository secret. We want to paste in that API token, which is just a very random string. I don't care that it's exposed here because this is just a test module and it's only scoped specifically for that one. In this case here, my GitHub Actions is expecting that token to be called PS Gallery token. The workflow that I've actually got in there allows you to define a password and a code signing certificate as a base64 value that will actually sign the module for you. But I don't want to go into that right now. That's probably a bit more advanced, and most people won't really actually have one of those certificates. So we only need this secret, and essentially that this secret will only run when you're running it from this main branch. If someone forks it, they won't have access to the secret. If someone runs a PR, where they won't have access to that secret, it has to be specifically a run based on that main branch. So you can make sure that you don't actually commit things that will expose this password, so it actually stays a secret. So we've got it on there. That's basically everything that's done there. We've made sure that our action has ran to completion, so we can see everything's green. It's all good. We can see that there's a whole bunch of different artifacts from that build. So the PS module is the new package that you can use to test locally based on that actual run there. But that's just sort of just extra artifacts for it. So to now publish this module, my action workflow, what I need to do is I need to click on create a new release. I need to create a new, I want to create a new tag. Make sure it starts with V, then the actual module number, so the module version. So I'm creating a release at 0.1.0. I want to create a new tag. So this is just a test description for release. And I click on publish release. So the GitHub action YAML file that I've actually published has a trigger. So when it sees a tag has been published that starts with V, it's going to trigger that to run again. So we'll go through that same stage of building the module, make sure the tests actually are running so that artifact that has been built is good. But the extra step is now the publish stage will run because it's got this V on a tag on there. So that's all part of that YAML documentation to do all that. And the beauty of copying an existing module is that I know that this one here should run to completion. So we can see in our actions that version 0.1.0 is starting. I can click on that. It's going to go through that same stage again. You want to make sure that whatever you actually tag it at reflects the same value that's in your manifest file. So in this case here, my PSD1, the module version reflects what I've actually tagged it. So when you're publishing a new one, just make sure that you actually bump the version and whatever you actually tag it is on there is correct. So while that's going through, I'll give you a quick glimpse of that workflow and what that looks like. So in this case here, we can see that pull requests will run on targets to main, and the release is the type. So whenever the release is actually made in that GitHub UI, will actually trigger this run here. There's a whole bunch of environment variables. So to just disable telemetry, just to sort of speed things up, that's all sort of optional. And then the build configuration. So if it sees that it's actually been tagged that starts with a V, it's going to create a release build rather than the debug one. So that strips a few things like symbols and makes things just a bit faster, creating the release build. You don't really have to do that, but it's just sort of a nice thing. So we can see that the first build that we have here checks out the repository. So this does a git clone based on this one here. If it's debug, it's going to call the build with debug. If it's publish one, it's going to call it with the publish. But when I was talking about those extra environment variables, so if you've got these secrets set, we'll actually publish it and sign the artifact for you. But in this case here, that's not really a thing. So we can just ignore that. The last step is that it will actually upload the new package that was actually created. So you can use it for further testing if you want locally. That's just sort of a testing thing. The test stuff, you've defined the matrix. So in this case here, it's running on 3 different things. We're going to run on PowerShell, Windows PowerShell, so 5.1, and Windows PowerShell again, but on the 32-bit version. It's probably a bit overkill for most things. It's just things that you can actually do, and you can set specific PowerShell versions if you like. So the sky's the limit with what you want to do. So it's going to download that artifact that it published in the previous step. It's going to extract all that information so it's actually usable by PowerShell. It's going to run the tests, and then it's just going to publish the test results. So the pest information, the coverage stuff, all those different types of things. So that last stage that I was talking about is the publish one. It's got an if statement. So this only runs if this is a run based on a tag that starts with V. You can set any other conditions that you like. I just like to be able to control it through the GitHub UI with a new release. But if someone pushes a tag into main that doesn't start with V, then this will still be skipped. So you can tag it however you like. You can put your own naming standards that you like. This is just what I do. So what this does is it needs to make sure that build and test is actually passed. It's going to download that artifact that it built in the previous stages. So we're making sure we're publishing stuff that we've actually tested. In this case here, it's going to call .NET to actually publish this NuGet to the PowerShell gallery. You can use PowerShell itself. So the publish module, I think, is the command that it's called. But in this case here, I've already got the NuGet, so I don't need to worry about PowerShell doing all that. I just can use the .NET command to push that to the PowerShell gallery based on the actual secret that we have on there. Um, and that's it. So once that's done, it should theoretically be pushed to the PowerShell gallery. We can go back to our action run. So the publish is actually running, which is great. It's download that new package, and now it's going to call the .NET publish to the PowerShell gallery. So this should take 15, 20 seconds or so, depending on how large it actually is. So I'm hoping it won't be too much longer.
Does anybody have any questions while we're waiting?
Pardon?
I'm just asking the chat if anyone has any questions while we're waiting.
Cool. Cool. So that job is complete. That will turn green. So we've successfully created a very basic binary module. And if we go into the PowerShell gallery, it's going to make a liar out of me. Why is that not appearing?
EDM?
It could be that it may need a few minutes to actually refresh. If I go into this one here, it'll appear.
Yeah,
so
yep.
So we've got test bin. It's got that actual version. No one's downloaded it because it's a bit useless and I've just published it. If we look in the file list, we can see that it's got our PSD1, PSM, it's got our help information, and it's even got our binary DLL in there. So that's sort of what we've actually compiled and built. So that's it. You can install this module right now if you like on your systems. You can actually run that get hello world and do all the fun stuff that you like on there. And that's creating a binary PowerShell module from start to finish. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. Oh, let's see if this can flick back to the way it's supposed to. I don't think it is. Thank you so much for that, Jordan. Oh, okay, that's really weird. I can see that the scene's kind of flicking between active speakers. If that works. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. If you've got any questions, can you throw them in the chat below? Yeah, it's kind of funny. One of the things that I was looking at was just like the workflow, and I was just thinking, oh my god, it's so much better than mine. Like, in the sense, it's just so much better like laid out. I kind of just looked at the documentation and kind of fudged mine together. So it was, yeah, it's something that, yeah. I love that kind of framework. It just makes it a lot easier to kind of get stuff done.
I usually like to avoid complicating that stuff as much as possible. So, like, I put a lot of the actions and the working stuff inside scripts themselves, so I can run them locally and replicate it. And the workflow is just essentially piecing together what I would do locally, which is great for testing things because trying to debug CI actions is very hard and annoying. So that's one of the things that I have on there. And the other thing I like to do is I try and make it as generic as possible. And it's not perfectly done. As I go along, I find new things and I fix stuff up. But that's why I sort of just copy my latest module because it usually has the latest updates and go from there. So the next thing I'd really like to do is actually create those templates so I can actually have a single source of truth for it. But yeah, time will tell, and like it's something that evolves as you go on.
Yeah. I do have some questions, additional questions from Matt. So the first question is, firstly, he says, yeah, nice DevOps strategy. He really liked it. The second, the first question is, what would you say are the benefits of doing modules via a binary rather than script based?
Yeah, so the main benefits that I see is that with a binary module, you can reference .NET assemblies a lot easier. So that CS project file that I had before, you can actually reference anything from NuGet.org or is it .org? Yeah, NuGet.org, and there's a massive amount of libraries that are available on there. So like it's the PowerShell gallery, but for C# or .NET stuff, and the the wealth of stuff that you can actually get on there is pretty crazy. So it's really fun to be able to do that and have that as part of your build life cycle instead of downloading those DLLs manually and storing it in a Git repo, trying to make sure you actually track them as you go. Being able to do the binary module sort of gives you that by default, which is quite nice. The other benefits that I find is that you can do error handling a bit better than what you can find in script modules. So you may or may not have come across it, but like with PowerShell, where you have error records and exception types and how that interacts with the pipeline, it can get quite confusing, especially if you're not sort of used to it with script modules and how it can actually impact things outside it. With with binary modules, it sort of forces you a bit more to actually do that correctly, in my opinion. So it's quite nice to be able to have that sort of more saner error handling for it. And I didn't go through that, unfortunately, but it's something that I think is a positive for it. C sharp is also a bit more performant, so you can do things maybe a bit faster. So if you're doing like loops and sort of dealing with like big objects and stuff like that, you probably get some benefits by using an actual compiled assembly. If you're using any sort of p-invoke stuff, so like sort of platform APIs and some of the more advanced things, you already have C sharp that compiles for you. You don't have to use add type or any other things. The other thing that I find quite annoying with script based modules is PowerShell classes. So, PowerShell classes are quite simple and they sort of work when they work. But if you're trying to export a class publicly, you come across quite a few issues actually trying to export that properly and referencing it outside the module. It also doesn't support things like getters and setters on properties and a whole bunch of other stuff that sort of C sharp gives you by default. So I find it's a lot more beneficial there. The two things that I find are a bit more problematic with binary modules is dealing with the provider API. So things like get item, set item, get content, all that type of stuff. It is possible, but the API is a bit advanced and a bit sort of obtuse, in my opinion. So you can get it working, but it's not as nice as like a script module where you can just call get item or get content and other stuff like that. So if you're dealing with that, usually you just stick with the .NET APIs to actually do whatever it is. So like system IO file to read files and other stuff like that. The other thing is calling other PowerShell functions or commandlets inside a binary module isn't very nice or isn't really possible. So if you're having other PowerShell functions in your hybrid module that you want to call, that's not an easy thing to do. The way that I work around that is that I put all the common code in sort of .NET classes outside of those commands, and I just call them like I would in sort of PowerShell scripts. So there's ways around it, but if you're wanting to call other commandlets inside PowerShell itself, it's not as easily done compared to script-based modules. There's probably other things that I'm missing for it, but yeah, like the three main things is error handling, access to .NET properties, and performance reasons.
Cool. I have another question from Matt. Yeah, that's a good benefit. Oh, sorry, no. I would assume one benefit is the access to the full C# code / library. So yeah, I think you've already kind of covered that. So yeah, cool. Anyway, does anyone else have any other questions?
I just want to confirm quickly that I have installed the module. I've done get help on the command and I've run the command. It works. Yay. It was a great demo. You made it look so easy. It's ridiculous.
The hardest thing that I found was doing your first module. So I
Yeah.
know like a lot of these things you'll forget and you won't remember. So if you're ever wanting to try and do this yourself, please come to the PowerShell Discord and ask your questions there. Like that's where I learned how to do these things. There's some very smart people on there that know how to do this, can answer your questions, and you're going to have questions. So being able
Yeah.
to sort of just ask someone how to do it, perfect.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm just going to see if I can paste the link into the chat. One moment.
And can we contribute to that module if we want to? Like if we want to make changes?
Hey, you can send a pull request and we can continue release if you like. It's got tests.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be a future talk where you could talk about the collaboration side of things, where you can have, it's kind of adding the for people who are not fully across Git, and they're kind of talking about the collaboration of the module.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd love to see that.
Yeah. I've just
I'll
pasted the chat.
the module. Um, I'll Yeah, I'll keep it there. It doesn't matter that I've got a test bin on there, but I'll keep the repo as well alive so people can actually have a look at it and see the code and take whatever they like or just sort of see how things were done. Yeah, so like if you want to have a look at it, it'll stay out online and you can go from there.
Awesome.
I just had a thought. We could essentially make this a bit of a meme and make it the most downloaded module in the gallery.
What?
So you got to push it to 1 million downloads.
Yeah. I think we can do that. I'd be interested in how they record that. That'd be a bit of a meme. Like, what's this module? This is amazing.
So there's a collection with Ansible, which is similar to modules of Ansible from one of the core contributors. He created a collection called Toilet Water. There's a whole bunch of things that he just doesn't want to put inside the main engine, but just have it sort of available for people to use. So that's usually our go-to collection to rag on and talk about and test things with.
Maybe this is the maybe this will be the one. But it's to be honest, it actually is. I think it'd be a really good demo, a demo module anyway, just to kind of sit there and you can people can raise pull requests to it and understand the whole understand and get a bit of understand though, get more familiar with better acquainted is probably the better word with that whole process. Geez, not with it today, as my daughter says, Daddy, you're not with it today. So but anyway, yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Links are in the chat. Yeah, so like I said, next month is talk with Scriptrunner, and yeah, I hope to see you guys then. We obviously can continue the chat within the PowerShell Discord, also within our Slack. Yeah, feel free if you need to reach out to Jordan, you can reach out to him via Twitter or via Discord, the PowerShell Discord in Slack, and yeah, various other channels.
Pull request.
Yeah, all by pull request. I have had to, and this is actually a quick little side story with regards to the book to go and find people to actually go and edit, to go and do some editing. They didn't include their email address, so I actually just went to their GitHub and then raised an issue on there. Hey, you need to go and work on the book.
It works.
It works. It was very unconventional, but it works. So
It's great.
That's a life lesson. It's an alternative way of doing things. But anyway, everyone, thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Sayers.
Thanks.